Now, a rather strange thing happened roughly a month and a half ago, back on the day the first two episodes of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series dropped on Disney+, which was that at Star Wars Celebration that very day, at the Hasbro panel to be exact, it was announced that Hasbro, wanted to create a new Black Series Force FX Elite lightsaber for Reva, or what is essentially a replica of her lightsaber. And you might immediately say, well, what's so strange about that? Isn't it pretty much the norm to release any and all types of toys and or merchandise for a new Star Wars show, especially one as big and as hyped as the Kenobi series is or was going into it? And the answer to that is, yeah, of course, every significant piece of Star Wars content that comes out is going to get merchandise to the fullest extent by many different companies, including Hasbro, who has been making Star Wars toys for almost 3 decades now. But the fact that it existed, or almost was going to exist, more on that in a second, well, that wasn't exactly the strange part. Instead, it was the fact that this lightsaber, again Reva's twin-bladed saber, was going to be what's called a Hazlab project. And if you're not a big collector, you probably have little or no idea what a Hazlab project even is, so I'll take a quick moment or two to explain it. Okay, so roughly 4 years ago at this point, Hasbro came up with this idea that they could finally make some of the bigger or more expensive items or collectibles that fans had wanted for a very, very long time, but that they couldn't justify taking a risk on. That they couldn't risk sinking a ton of time and money into designing something only for it to end up not selling at retail because of a high cost, despite the fact that, again, these are things that people or fans have been asking for years. Long story short, Hasbro wanted to make expensive toys that fans had been asking for forever. They even say right in the marketing that this is a chance to make dream items, but they didn't want to risk that fans wouldn't actually buy them if they did indeed make their dreams come true. So they decided to essentially crowdfund. They'd put the idea or basic design for the item out there, ask fans if they'd be willing to pay a price up front, and if enough fans backed it, it would get made and eventually it would show up and fill a space in your collection. The first such Hazlab project, which for the record I backed, was Jabba's sail barge for the Vintage Collection line, which is basically a line of 3 3/4 inch figures and ships and so on that are, you could say, modeled after the original Kenner figures from way back in the day, or at least the packaging is taken straight from that. The figures themselves are much better and more highly articulated than those original ones were. Anyway, the sail barge was $500 and ultimately ended up getting the necessary amount of backers and then some. It initially required 5,000, and after 45 days, the allotted time to decide whether to back it or not, 7,726 people put their money where their mouth had been for decades, and a little over a year later, it was delivered, and the bulk of collectors, or at least from what I've seen or heard from, they were extremely happy and satisfied with both it and the whole process and idea in general. Even though, yeah, I think we could certainly discuss or debate how silly or ridiculous or even how sad or even a touch unethical it is that a billion-dollar company needs to essentially crowdfund, that they simply won't take the risk and, well, put their money where their mouth is. But giving them the benefit of the doubt here, it is nice, as a collector, to get the opportunity to get things they never would consider making otherwise. Ethical or not, it's great to get a chance to own some of these dream items. Which might lead you back to or make you wonder, how would making Reva's lightsaber, a brand new character, be considered a sort of dream project that collectors had wanted for years? How or why did Hasbro expect people to pay $500 upfront for a lightsaber from a character they didn't know yet? Though, in all fairness, they would get a chance to watch the whole Kenobi series before the window to back it closed. Also, again in fairness, the Razor Crest, Mando's ship from the series, had also been a Hazlab project roughly 2 years earlier, and an extremely successful one at that, and it also wasn't or isn't something collectors had been wanting or asking for years. However, that project was announced well after the first season of The Mandalorian, and the ship itself had become a huge hit with the fans. They didn't announce it the day the first episode of the first season of The Mandalorian dropped. They announced it during the also highly successful and beloved second season of the series, and it had also been something fans had already started clamoring for. But anyway, arguably the strangest part about all of this wasn't actually the fact that this was a Hazlab project, that they considered a brand new character's lightsaber a dream project fans had always wanted and would be willing to pay $500 for. It was the way they tried to sell it or market it after the fact. Or maybe I should say the way they didn't try to sell it after the fact. Because you see, a little less than a year ago, Hasbro had another Star Wars Hazlab project, and yes, these come along once every year or so. They also do them for other properties like Marvel, Transformers, and G.I. Joe. Anyway, a little less than a year ago, Hasbro announced a project for a Black Series Rancor from Return of the Jedi, of course, or one that would be in a 6-inch scale. And this time around, fans or collectors tended to balk at the $350 price tag or asking price. Nor were they very impressed with the unlocked tiers or the little extra things Hasbro would add or include if a certain number of people had backed the project. And so in the coming weeks afterwards, or in the 45-day window collectors had to back the project or not, Hasbro did anything and everything they could to actually sell the thing. They had multiple live stream events and even added another figure in to try and sweeten the deal or soften the blow of that high price tag. In other words, they seemed more than a little surprised fans weren't as excited or eager to shell out their money as they thought they would be, and they fought like hell to get people to back it, even kind of catering and bending a little bit to the fans, which, if you're a collector, you know is not something Hasbro tends to do. Nevertheless, it ultimately still fell short or a bit shy of the 8,000 required backers, though in the final day or so when it was clear it wasn't going to cross the line, backers started to pull out and the whole thing just kind of collapsed in the final hour. With Revas Lightsaber, however, well, it never even got anywhere close to the 5,000 required backers. Instead, it only got around 1,300, and at no point did Hasbro do or say, well, much of anything to really try and entice people to buy it. Yes, there were articles online touting it, but to people who really weren't collectors in the first place, to just average people who likely weren't going to plunk down $500 for a lightsaber. But when it comes to things that would actually reach or speak to fans, like live streams, well, there were none of them, and there were also no tiers announced, nothing done to sweeten the deal as it became clear that this thing likely wasn't going to get backed. It was almost as if they, Hasbro, knew from the very start that this had virtually no chance of ever reaching that goal. But for some reason they went ahead with the project anyway, and though I don't want to put on a tinfoil hat and go full-on conspiracy theory here, I would really like to know why they went ahead with this one. Why would you go all in on a double-bladed lightsaber that cost, again, $500 from a brand new character and expect 5,000 people to back it, when you could have, picked another character who uses a double-bladed lightsaber and make theirs and have a much, much better chance of getting it backed? Because the thing is, if you ask any collector who understands the hobby at all, they'd flat out tell you there was almost no chance of it ever getting backed. Even the collectors out there on YouTube or elsewhere who are always positive for the sake of being positive, even they seemed confused about why this was a Hazlab project and were skeptical about it getting backed. Which then leads back to the question of what exactly was Hasbro thinking with this one? Were they somehow clueless and thought this would be a success? And if so, why did they just let it fizzle out and die when they fought like hell to save the Rancor? Or is it possible, putting that tinfoil hat on now, that Hasbro was politely asked by Lucasfilm to make this particular lightsaber? And since they, Hasbro, knew it wouldn't actually end up selling well if they just created it and sent it to retail, that it would end up sitting on store shelves collecting dust, which, go figure, retailers don't like very much, they used Hazlab as a sort of excuse or way around that. They said to Lucasfilm that, yeah, we'll make Revas Lightsaber, but only if fans back it, knowing, of course, fans weren't going to back it. And mind you, this is only a guess based on the fact that I think it's very clear Reva was supposed to be, in the eyes of Lucasfilm, the character coming out of the Kenobi series that everyone loved, that fans just adored her story and really wanted to get more into the character. Moses Ingram was even sent on the publicity tour along with Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor. She was supposed to be the next great character of Star Wars, essentially, because they had said so. Forgetting the fact that fans always get the chance to choose, and in the case of Reva, at least when it comes to collectors and this Hazlab lightsaber, they clearly didn't choose to back her. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about all this. And if you're interested in collecting or the collecting side of Star Wars, do check out my second channel where I talk quite a bit about it and plan on talking even more about it in the future. Either way, leave your comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.